Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today is no exception, as we're joined by the wonderful Brennan Clost, who is currently starring in the new Netflix show, Tiny Pretty Things, which, if you haven't already binge watched it, is going to be your new obsession. And I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about the books that it's based on. So it's based on a young adult book series, and whether that was something that you found really useful to dive into, even as early as the audition stage when you knew that you were auditioning for a character within the series.
So one of my best friends, who I actually live in the same apartment building as, had kind of heard talks of the show coming down the pipeline, and so she read the books in advance. By the time I got the audition and then had to prepare the self-tape and got the callback, I didn't have time to read them, so I kind of got like the Coles notes from her. And then when we booked the series, actually, I still hadn't read the books, embarrassingly enough, but my mom and my grandma read them and gave me like all the spoilers, all these tidbits. My character in the book, they've taken a lot of creative liberties when adapting it to the series. And so my character name, I believe in the book, is Will, and he really plays like a tertiary role in the book. And so the series, they sort of took the essence of the books and took the three lead girls storylines and then really sort of painted the climate with bringing the boys more in as leads and adding these adult storylines and kind of fleshing out the world in a way that way. So I have now read the books, but when we were filming the series, I hadn't read them because the show really takes the essence of the books, and the essence of the books I lived. They're based in the School of American Ballet in New York City, and I, dancing at Juilliard, shared the same dorm building as the School of American Ballet students. So the dorm building that they talk about in the book and the studios that they dance in, I've been in real life. So I almost felt like my real life experience was a little richer than even maybe the books could have tapped into when approaching the role.
Yeah. And to that point with kind of the environment and the ecosystem that you live within when you're studying, because it is so intensive, I was interested in how that informed a lot of the relationships between characters on screen, but also the camaraderie behind the camera as well, because you're portraying these characters who aren't just studying together, they're living together in dorms, they're sharing rooms with each other, and every single aspect of their lives is completely intertwined to the point where, yes, you're hanging out with people who you would be friends with anyway, but also you're still forced to be in close quarters with people that you normally wouldn't be. So how did that kind of impact the environment on set, but also the way that you formed character relationships on screen together?
Yeah, we used to talk about this a lot at university. We called it like the Juilliard bubble. And I feel like that was so true with filming this show. And what then influenced the on-screen character relationships was this sort of idea of like being in a bubble. Was we were filming all day, every day, Monday through Friday, 17-hour shoot days. And then on top of that, with the dancing, we were rehearsing every single day over the weekends. And then maybe squeezing in a night out together or dinner together or shuttling to and from set, running lines together, talking about life together. So it was really all encompassing. And I think it reads in the chemistry of the characters on the show, because our experience filming the show is very similar, like what you said, to what it would be in a program like this, where it's just 24/7 all together, the small, intimate little group of you. And the line really does start to blur. I had to have my agent at one point be like, they are your colleagues. Like, maybe don't talk to them about this and this and this, because the line blurs so much between work and personal and character and best friendship. And also with dance, the relationship that we're forming is so physical and tactile that then the ideas about intimacy and friendship and character, all of that sort of blurs. It's unlike a lot of other relationships I'd imagine you'd have on set. And like I said, I think it's reflected in the chemistry on camera.
Yeah. And with television, because it's so fast paced, a lot of the times the scripts are still being written as you're already in production. But because with Netflix, they put the series out as a whole and they greenlight the whole series from the get go. Was it something where you had all of the scripts at the beginning, or did you just have some of the details? Because your character goes on such an amazing arc, especially kind of like as you get to like episode 6 and 7, we really start to get much more in depth with who he is.
No, we were not given the episodes in advance. They really tried to keep us on our toes, I think, to inform the mystery element of the show. So we block shot the series, so 2 episodes at a time, and those are the only scripts that we saw up until like 4 days before the next block. They would give us the next 2 scripts so that we could do our preparation work and whatever. So I believe the person who is the culprit who pushed Cassie, they were told right off the gate, but the rest of us didn't know that they were told. So all of us reading the scripts were like, did I do it? Like, we didn't know who had done it the whole time while filming. Yeah, so we were really kept in the dark with a lot of story points. And actually our showrunner, Michael, had pre-written all of the scripts except for the finale. And so when we got to that table read, he kind of gave us a little talk and talked about how special it was writing episode 10, because when he initially conceived the idea of the adaptation and had developed the series, he didn't know who was going to be playing these characters. So he was really writing for these fictional people. And now that he knew us and knew how we'd read lines and what we sounded like and how we interact with each other, he got to write episode 10. And he said it was such a gift and so exciting to write for now these people that he loved. And so that was the only episode that I guess had been written while in development. The other ones, of course, we got revamps of them leading up to the shoot day. But yeah, it was quite last minute. It felt for me getting the scripts and then pumping them out to camera like the next week.
Yeah. How did that then inform a lot of the details in the way that you built out your character? Because there's a lot of kind of backstory elements in terms of who his family are and where he grew up and the type of environment that he kind of like came from before coming to the ballet school that obviously we don't see on screen, but you portray so beautifully and intrinsically through your character. Were those details that Michael still gave you up front so that you would have those tools, or was it something where you had to kind of slightly make adjustments as you went along because of it?
Yeah, we were really fortunate to have such an open level of communication with the producers and especially our showrunner. He had these meetings with all of us, lead cast. Actually, I believe everyone, all of the recurring cast on the series had these one-on-one meetings with him right out of the gate. While we had 2 weeks of dance rehearsal off the top, so it gave us quite a lot of time to ask him questions about the characters and whatnot. But we had like 1.5 hour long meetings one-on-one with the showrunner, and he gave us a lot of backstory. And he told us, because our characters, the audience doesn't find out where we were the night that Cassie fell until episode 5 or 6 in a flashback. But so when we're filming episode 1, of course, that's chronologically already happened. So he told us secrets like that. And we did talk in depth about these characters' backstories and interpersonal relationships with their family and how long maybe they'd been at this school. So I knew going into it that Shane and Oren's friendship is so complex. And so a question for me was, okay, well, how long have they been roommates? How long they've been friends for? And so Michael told me right at the get-go that Shane and Oren both started at the school around like age 10 and were roommates right away. And so now they're 16 or 17 and have been best friends and roommates and brothers for 6 years. So all of that sort of history really did inform kind of the initial place when you meet Shane. And then I was kind of learning and exploring, and it was challenging for me as we went to sort of what you said, adapt and revolve with where the story was going.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting in terms of his family backstory. You know, he mentions that he's even got family members who are serving time. So they're really not kind of present in the story in the way that some of the other characters, their parents are very involved in their ambitions, and their ambitions are kind of their parents' ambitions a little bit as well. But with Shane, just we don't see his family. We don't witness that. There's clearly a little bit of a distance there. So how did that inform the way that you then constructed a lot of elements of him and thought about, you know, where his drive and ambition would have come from if he wasn't being pushed by his family, and how he ended up at this school and in this space?
I feel very fortunate to be playing this character because a lot of sort of those nuances I pulled from my real life. I feel like Shane and I both share that we grew up in a smaller town, a more closed-minded town, and it wasn't until sort of our passion for dance pulled us out of there and we were then able to flourish in this new creative environment with like-minded individuals. And so a lot of that sort of ambition and passion and drive, I read old journals of mine from when I was living at home or when I first got into Juilliard and moved away to New York, and informed a lot of the backstory of his character through experiences of my own as well.
Mm-hmm. And I really love watching the relationship play out between Shane and Oren, his roommate, but also they're, you know, they do have a relationship. And I think one of the things that's really special about Shane is that he never tries to push Oren come out. You know, he understands that it's a very personal thing that everybody has to be on their own stage with. And I feel like that must have given you a really instrumental amount of detail into like who he is as a person, what his core values are, and just wanted to ask you about how much just details like that really impacted the way that you constructed who he is as a character and how he interacts with those around him and treats them.
Yeah, I really took into consideration that what you said about Shane and Oren and the way that he approaches his friendship with Oren in nothing but love and openness. And he does the same thing with Nevaeh, and that really informed me that out of everyone at the school, Shane is the first one to sort of open his hand to her and welcome her in and kind of show her the ropes and time and time again, Shane shows up for people as a good friend. And so that sort of heart to the character was really the core that I then approached everything else. Yes, he's funny and snappy and has this sort of deep-seated rage, but above all, Shane is ready to love and he really wants to be loved. So I like always going into a scene was like, okay, how can I sort of filter this through the lens of loving this person, whether it's friendship or something more, or whatever it is. Even with Bet, it was sort of like, okay, he does love her in a way in this partnership. And so how do I approach the role with that? Yeah, at the core of Shane, it really is sort of his heart and his love. And the Netflix executives, when they flew up for our wrap party, they had seen a bunch of the episodes. And I remember them saying to me, they're like, Shane is like just the heart on this show. He is like so led by his heart. And so I'm really happy that people see that, because that for me was what was so important when approaching him as a character.
Yeah, and I love that you just mentioned his friendship with Nevaeh and how he's, you know, your very first scene is him just welcoming her into the space. And wanted to ask you about working with Kylie Jefferson and how the two of you really constructed that relationship so delicately, because you build such an intrinsic trust between these two characters from very early stages together.
Yeah, Kylie and I are both, okay, I say this because I know how it sounds, but we're both Libras. And what I mean by that is that her and I constantly were sort of balancing each other out in the ensemble. And then when we had these one-on-one scenes, and I think because of the relationship written for these characters, very quickly, her and I sort of were just like, all right, we're going to trust each other. And she said too, she had a friend at university. She went to Boston Conservatory for dance. And she had a friend who Shane reminded her a lot of. And so I think she probably brought a lot of that friendship to the table. And I've had tons of friends in my life that Kyla reminds me of. And I think we sort of just decided, like, these characters trust each other and see themselves in each other. And her and I think she feels the same way as well, but we see a lot of ourselves in each other. And we're constantly sort of like equaling each other out and constantly like flowing between what does she need in the scene versus what do I need? What's she going through today on set? How can I be there for her, and vice versa? Yeah, so I'm happy with how it comes across on camera, because we loved working together.
Yeah. And I was also curious about what the setup looked like in terms of structuring out, rehearsing, and putting together scenes, because, you know, obviously you've got the dialogue driven scenes and then you've got the dance scenes. You know, when you're somewhere like Juilliard or you're doing a stage performance, there's weeks, if not months, that go into like every single performance. And with this show, you're putting together so many original performances, both for the show within the show, but there's a lot of kind of interstitial dance moments in the show as well. And I imagine that they must have had to come together very quickly with a lot less time to rehearse. So I was just curious about what that kind of scene setup and rehearsal process looked like in terms of the dialogue and the dance scenes kind of coming together cohesively.
Yeah, I'm thinking of one scene in particular in the pilot, the Sleeping Beauty scene, which is a big scene, multiple pages. We shot that over, I think, 2 full shoot days were just dedicated to that big scene where they're all partnered up. Shane and Bet are rehearsing together, The Fall, and then Nevaeh and Oren's sweeping duet that kind of finished out with Ramon coming in at the end. All of that we rehearsed. So all of us learned that core Sleeping Beauty duet that you see Nevaeh and Oren dance in the pilot, because that's actually what we're rehearsing earlier in the scene, is sections from that. So we had a lot of rehearsals out of the gate leading up to the start of the first block, where we had the choreographer come in and work with us, and we were learning all the choreography for the first block for episodes 1 and 2, and I believe bits of episode 3 before we even went to camera. And then we had our director come in and sort of just watch the rehearsals and plan out, okay, so maybe bare bones blocking, this is where in the space Shane and Bet's fall happens. We had formations, we had groups that would come in and out. And then with dances later in the season, I think at that point, because these characters, because it's an ensemble cast, all of our stories are really happening at different times in different places. So it was so challenging to all be together in the room to rehearse something as the season went on. And so my heart goes out to the ADs and our line producer, because it must have been a nightmare. We were filming scenes in the morning, going to having lunch, filming in the afternoon, running to rehearsal, getting all sweaty, running back to hair and makeup, getting reprocessed, going back to set, filming scenes. Weekends we had rehearsals, and we were mainly learning like choreography first. Director would come in, kind of see it, and then maybe in the studio give us the bones of the blocking, and then the rest of it was sort of worked out on the day. Because with dance, so much of it has to kind of be left up to movement and flow, and yeah, I'm trying to remember. But yeah, I feel like that's the best way I can explain it. I don't know. We really did learn as we went along too. And I think for future seasons, we've almost like worked out a good formula now by the end. The first block felt just hectic, trying to balance all the dancing and the acting and intimacy rehearsal on top of it too, because all of the intimate steamy scenes are choreographed basically as well. So we have like movement that we've learned for those, movement that we've learned for dances, solos, group dances, blocking for scenes. It was a whirlwind. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that the first time that you'd worked with an intimacy coordinator, and kind of what was that experience like in terms of just the safety and the trust of having someone really choreograph and really be looking out for all of the performers in those scenes?
Yeah, this was my first time working with an intimacy coordinator, and Casey Hideki was incredible. She was so thoughtful and very like receptive to what we needed. And it was challenging to try and advocate for yourself too, because you don't want to let the team down, you don't want to let the production down, but you do want to sort of make sure you feel as comfortable as possible. And I was so lucky with my scene partners, with Bart and with Josh. They're both so thoughtful, and we developed such great friendships that then the intimacy on camera was like layered with such a trust that I felt like we could really go for it. And we really trusted our directors for those blocks, and they were really specific with us about what shot was happening when, and we had the choreography worked out ahead of time, and our on-set wardrobe, Peter, was always ready with a robe to run in and cover us, and like so thoughtful. If it was too warm in there and our intimacy garbs were like peeling off because of the heat, he'd run in with fans. Like the whole production really came together to make sure we felt so safe, because they knew for a lot of us it was our first time experiencing anything like this. So I think they wanted us to feel really confident and safe, and I did, which was great.
That's so fantastic to hear. Jumping back to some of the dance sequences, I was interested in the unique challenges of character portrayal within those scenes and those moments, because you're obviously portraying the character Shane, but then you're portraying a story within a story, and he's performing a character in of itself that needs to be very centered and very focused, but you're still capturing so many kind of like nuanced character details within that. So what were the unique challenges that came with the duality required of that?
This was such a silly thing, but it did really help me, because I feel like Shane has almost this like such a duality to his personality, and we represented that with his hair, funny enough. But in the studio, he always has his bleached hair slicked back, like very focused, ready, prepared. And then we imagined, like even in the scene with Nevaeh in the shoe room, which chronologically they basically put on their warm-ups and walk right out of the studio, his hair is all messed up and tousled. And so we imagined that he's like slicked, prim and proper in the studio, and then walks out and is like, F it, and just like scruffs it all up and then moves into his life. And so that I think really helped me, funny enough. Like the wardrobe does influence so much, the hair, the styling, everything. So the hair was like such a detail that I held on to that really helped me, just with like Shane in these different atmospheres. But then you're right, Shane as Jack the Ripper had such a different nuance, but a lot of times I tried to layer that with whatever he was going through in the moment. And because he's partnered with Bet, there's already such a tension between them that tension lended itself really easily to playing sort of this like villain in the ballet. And then that Oren is the cop, and he already has such a tense and layered relationship with him. And so kind of finding the through line of, character, Tiny Pretty Things character, and then also Jack the Ripper character was fun. I had a journal dedicated to just tracking the character arc, because like I said, we block shot. So we shot everything out of order. So at times I'd filmed like a breakup scene and I'm sobbing, and then the next day actually happens an episode before and I'm still crushing on him, and it's the whole other. So I had a full journal just dedicated to like every single time you see my character, what do I know at this point, and made sure to be like very on top of that and organized so that I could track it for myself.
Yeah. When you were shooting the next step, because that also involved a lot of dance elements, there was something that you talked about then that I thought was really interesting, that just, even in terms of just the warm up, that you wouldn't have the same amount of time to do that as you would, again, when you were studying or you're doing a stage performance. And so I wanted to ask whether that was the case on this show as well. And if so, kind of like from working on the next step for so many episodes and for a myriad of seasons, kind of if you kind of redeveloped the way that you warm up to have a more truncated version for when you really need to just like pull it out of the bag, but make sure that your body is physically ready and safe before you film those scenes.
I absolutely do. Because unfortunately, with film and TV across the board, it's oftentimes hurry up and wait. But a lot of times with dance on these ensemble shows, it's hurry up and then go to camera. And so we sometimes would be told that we had an hour, but then something would happen and, oh, just kidding, you're filming right now, throw on your ballet shoes, we're going. And so I do have a very condensed full body warm up that I know will get me ready enough for the scene. Also thinking about, depending what the scene needs, am I performing on stage in this scene? Like, should Shane be performance ready, or is it a rehearsal where I can sort of get away with not warming up through the scene? I don't mean it that way, but that he is in this sort of like practice state, and there's a difference that I prepare my body for those kind of things, even though it is all performative being filmed for camera. I don't know if that makes sense. But we did, like I said, with even the dance rehearsals, we got better at it as we went along. So at the beginning, Kashmir and I filmed that duet so many times in different iterations, and we had different versions of it. And there was one particular day where I believe it was when we were all flying out to Chicago. So we were under like an airplane leaving deadline, and she had to just like whip on her pointe shoes, and we had to film this whole duet, and we were so cold and not ready. We got maybe 10 minutes to warm up before filming it, and walked away from it being like, I'm praying that the editors will work their magic and pick the shots that look okay, because none of that felt good. But then by the end, or even midway through, we advocated for what we needed. We're like, if we have a big dance day, we need a full ballet class, or at least a full ballet bar to get our bodies ready. And the producers really listened. Like, they valued us as the experts on dance. And so what we asked for, they were really caring to supply for us. So by the end, especially all the Ripper dancing, they came to us and said, how is it easiest for us to film all of this dancing? Because we had the men's section, we had the women's section, we had the group dance, we had all of us duets, we had solos that had to be filmed, and from multiple different camera setups. So you're dancing the same dance 6-7 times from the front, turn around, film it all from the back, punch in for specials. And so how do you keep your body warm for all of that, and then also recover and then be ready to go again for a different section? And it takes time to turn all the cameras around. So they came to us, which was so kind of them, to come to us and ask, what is the best for your bodies? How can we structure the filming day so that your bodies aren't broken by the end? And we got better at it as we went along.
That's incredible to hear that they ended up really looking to you guys for what you needed. That's amazing. There's also, within the show, there's so much of a theme and an undercurrent. There's even voiceover elements that really talk about, what it takes and what it requires to be a dancer at this level, like the dedication, even when you were talking about, your character Shane having come to this school when he was 10 years old and what that would have meant and the amount of time. And you've obviously lived and experienced that even before your time at Juilliard and all of the years of study that you've done and performance. And so on a personal level, kind of what aspects of that were you most excited to be able to bring into the show and to really explore through your character and to be able to convey for audiences to understand exactly what it is that you give of yourself every single time that you give a performance and all the time that goes into that?
I just got chills from that question. You phrased it so beautifully. I really love that the show as a whole outlines the stakes at play. And I think I approached Shane from that. I just remember how much it meant to me growing up to dance, and this different part of myself that I never got to show at high school that would come alive in dance rehearsal or on stage. And that like secret part of myself, I get to just share this entire show. And the next step, talking to that the world on the next step was very much the world that I grew up training in. But while I was filming on the next step, I would film for the months of like June, July, and August. And then I'd fly to New York and I'd be at Juilliard, which is a very different realm of dance. The next step was very sort of commercial competition. And then Juilliard's very concert classical training. And I never got to showcase that on the next step. just because of the world of that show. And so on Tiny Pretty Things, I get to share this, my passion and my love of dance, and also this side of my dancing that I've never showed before. And so it just felt like such a gift. And so I tried to always show that again with Shane, like the love, how much he loves dancing and how much it means to him. And I love that it's written into the story too. In moments when his heart's broken, he turns to dancing this solo on the roof, which is kind of hilarious, but also I feel that makes sense to me. That's how I work through conflict in my life. And so I love that the show, they were so thoughtful and did so much research into the world of dance when building it. And then I think across the board for all of us, it's just the dream role to be able to bring this like passion and love for dance in this new medium.
Mm-hmm. And something that I really admire that you've been using your platform for and your time for is that you've become involved in a lot of anti-bullying initiatives and go and give talks at elementary school. And just wanted to ask about the genesis of that and how that came about and kind of what that really means to you to be able to step into these spaces with kids and to be able to share your own personal experience so that they can feel kind of a little bit more strength and hopefulness in their day-to-day.
Yeah, kind of stemmed from my first elementary school, which funny enough, I actually left that elementary school because I was getting bullied so badly. I then like switched and joined a whole French immersion program just to kind of start fresh. But that first elementary school, they reached out to me through my mom. My mom's also an elementary school teacher. And so they got in touch with her to get in touch with me. And I actually went and spoke at their GSA, their Gay Straight Alliance. It was a night, it was like a Friday evening, and it was for students and parents to come, and they had me as a guest speaker just to sort of share my, I guess, success story. I hate to say it that way, but I guess sort of like growing up bullied for the thing that I loved and then sticking with it and finding success in that field. And so I developed this sort of like 20-minute, I call it my like 20-minute TED Talk. And it sort of is like a story time of these different instances where I just continued to not give up and follow what made me happy, and that was dance. And how my family, because I knew parents were going to be there, and my parents changed everything for me. It really is sort of my parents and my story of how we like survived the odds and then found success. I remember when I graduated from Juilliard, I said to them, I was like, this is our degree. Like, you guys helped me get here. And they came and visited on set and like got so teary-eyed and proud because it really was the three of us. And so I really try to highlight that in that sort of TED Talk, is this support system and how essential it is to have, whether it's your parents or friends. And the, I guess, like underlying message is never give up, follow your dreams and do what makes you happy. And it stemmed from that first GSA evening. Teachers then told other elementary schools, they contacted me, and I ended up doing like a mini tour, I guess, of like elementary schools going in and speaking, and then it turned into like full school assemblies rather than just like this little club. Yeah, which is crazy. And now I have a whole new ending to the story. Before it ended with like, and then Juilliard in the next step, and now it's Netflix and Tiny Pretty Things, which is amazing. So I'll have to update it.
No, that's so wonderful to hear. And especially the way that you kind of took that experience and stuck with it, but also have like pivoted into something that can help kids of a younger generation as well through sharing your experience. And thank you so much for talking to us about all of that and diving into the show so much with us today.
Of course, it was so lovely chatting with you. Thank you.